Hello, and yo Saturnalia to everyone out there, and welcome to yet another fun filled episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. Now, I've ranted about the Christmas season, so called Christmas season, many times before. Its origins are the Saturnalia during the Roman Empire, in which the people spent I think it's 12 days, might be a little less. My brain is a little foggy for some reason on the number of days, but it's in December, and it's a time of a lot of joy and celebration, exchanging of gifts. The colors of the festival are red and green, which sounds probably very familiar to you, but it basically emulates red, which is the color for the god Saturn, and the green represents the wreaths of greenery that they would put around the red columns at the temple of Saturn. And they legalized gambling, and slave owners would have a fun little switching of roles with their slaves, where the slaves would be the masters and the slave owners would be the slaves, and they would have fun for a few days, switching the roles, all in good fun. Sounds weird, right? They're having fun with their slaves. Slavery during the Roman Empire was a very different concept than what we have today. But that's a discussion for another podcast, probably on another channel. Anyway, Yo Saturnalia was a common way people would say, have a good Saturnalia. It's basically the Roman equivalent of Merry Christmas. But the Saturnalia itself ends on December 24th. And the 25th is another holiday called Sol Invictus. And that particular holiday was called, well, in English, it was called the rebirth of the unconquered sun. And that was on December 25th. It originated out of, I think, the Near East, and it became very popular throughout the empire at the end of the Saturnalia. And as I reflect on these ancient holidays and the pagan origins of everything we do around Christmas time and the, well, frankly, naivete of so many people who don't even know where it came from, I've ranted about this before. I'm not going to do it again. I'll try not to do it again today because I'm sure my listeners are tired of hearing it. But look up a previous podcast called A Random Holiday Rant, approximately 1 year ago. And I'll tell you all about the history of Saturnalia. But anyway, as I reflect on these holidays and how they may reflect my personal life, it's interesting because it in some ways mirrors my current life and my struggles with my physical ailments, which I will share some updates with respect to that here in a bit to underscore the difficulty that basically I'm facing these days. But then to still be alive and find ways to celebrate and to have joy, not unlike how the Romans would celebrate Sol Invictus, the rebirth of the unconquered sun. My life remains to this day of this recording, unconquered. I'm still alive. Apparently, there's life after hospice. It does go on, with or without you. And I want to talk about today how that strangely inadvertently mirrors a lot of what I've done in this and another, but particularly this holiday season. So bear with me here for a little bit. It might be an odd topic for a lot of people, but I'll start in the next segment explaining the physical difficulties that I've had as of recent and the consequences of those. Then we will move on from there, and hopefully, in the end, my incoherent rambling and ranting will make some sense, probably to some crazy person in a cell somewhere. Anyway, we'll get to that here in a moment. So, what has been happening lately with me physically with my terminal congestive heart failure? I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. It's very nasal and raspy. I have chronic hoarseness in my throat now, and that's from a lack of blood flow to my thorax and my throat. My heart is getting weaker and weaker, and it's unable to pump the necessary oxygen and other nutrients to parts of my body, causing various organs to perform poorly. One is my thorax, another is my skin that is dry, red, and peeling pretty much randomly in places and in pain. There's also full body muscular pain that is difficult to control that I've had pretty much every day recently. And it's been trying, to put it mildly. As my heart weakens, I guess, yeah, it makes total sense in hindsight that the inefficient blood flow throughout the body is going to cause issues with all those various organs, including, say, your skin, which is actually your largest organ. So I'm dealing with that. But in the last week, it got particularly worse. A lot of full body, severe muscle pain. It would hurt to sit, it would hurt to stand up, it would hurt to move. Basically, living was physically painful. Well, I should say is. They put me on a new pain medication that seems to keep it mostly at bay. Thankfully, sometimes I forget and I have to do another breakthrough on the pain. But sans medication, I'm facing full body pain in all my muscles for any movement. Basically, living hurts now. Literally, physically hurts. And in addition to that, in the last week, I had a really scary experience where I basically blacked out about a day and a half. And when I say I blacked out, I obviously was not pounding adult beverages or anything like that or abusing my medication. But I sort of came to in the middle of doing something one evening and I couldn't remember anything for the last day and a half. But I was doing things. I even looked at my phone. I was texting people. I was coherent. I made sense most of the time. I mean, not too much of a deviation from my randomness. Uh, not caused by anything I've done, but losing more than an entire day in memory was is very terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I had an event not too dissimilar from this approximately a year ago, year and a half ago, actually. That was much more severe, where I blacked out over 2 weeks of time. And in those 2 weeks, I was doing things. I was talking to providers. I was texting with friends. I was making phone calls. I was signing documents. I mean, I was functioning. But then all of a sudden, I forgot who I was, where I was. I ended up in a nursing home, and that's my first memory when I was already there. No memory of what happened before that, how I got there, nothing. Blank. The memory is totally blank. Terrifying. It was one of the worst and most traumatic experiences of my life, to be blunt. To lose 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks to God knows what. They didn't know what caused it either. They said it must have been some strange cardiac event. Yay. Uh, doesn't really help much. So, whatever that was, I suppose it happened again just recently in the last week. And so that is, needless to say, very troubling and unfortunate. And it's a sign of things getting worse. To me, it's a sign of things getting worse. Losing days is a terrible feeling. I also did actually, though, speak some incoherent stuff to people. Like, there was one conversation where I was talking to my father, and it was a normal conversation on the phone. And then I suddenly deviated to talking about something completely weird. Like my brain switched to something. Like I was somebody else suddenly in the middle of another conversation. One minute we're talking about, I don't know what we were talking about. Let's say food. I don't know. A normal conversation. And then suddenly I said something to the effect of, yeah, I can see the writing on that rock, but I can't fully make it out. It says something, but I'm not sure. And in my head, I imagined a big, sheer rock, like a flat rock, stuck in the ground, almost like a tombstone, but not. It wasn't a tombstone, but it was like a flat rock jabbed into the ground outside, and there was writing on it, and I couldn't make out what it said. It was just a strange vision I had in my head that I was trying to describe to my father randomly in the middle of a conversation. It made no sense at all. And thankfully, I immediately stopped. Like, wait a minute, where did that come from? That was random. And my dad was like, yeah, that was very random. So that's scary too. So I'm having blackouts. I'm having moments of completely bizarre, incoherent conversation, like I'm a madman. And I'm dealing with severe pain all the time that needs medication. And I can tell it's definitely taking a very sharp negative turn for the worst. I have an underlying sense of doom, not imminent per se, but I have a feeling in me that I can't explain that I'm fading. It's a very strange feeling to describe. I feel like I'm being erased. And eventually, I just won't be here anymore. It's a very strange feeling. That's the best way I can describe it. It's based on absolutely nothing. It's just a weird feeling I have deep, deep, deep in the recesses of my brain. I don't know the cause. I don't know the full meaning, frankly. I mean, it sounds bad. And it's unpleasant. So, needless to say, my physical well being in the last couple of weeks has been less than the best. And that is actually why I missed a podcast last week, and I apologize for that. It's because I was hurting so bad and so exhausted from everything and dealing with my illness. I really couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And I'm sure you can hear in my voice, it's a struggle for me to do it even this week. But it's not all doom and gloom. And that's where I'm going to get back to the Saturnalia, and in particular, Sol Invictus. Bear with me. It's a philosophical stretch, which I can still apparently do in my mind as I'm dying. That's something to be proud of, I guess. uh, but I see a reflection of these ancient holidays and relate them to my current well being in life. And it's interesting how they actually mesh together rather well. So I will try to explain that as best as I can coming up here. Bear with me. So, yes, the Saturnalia goes until December 24th. We're in the Saturnalia now. And truth being told, I have had a lot of celebrations. I've had a good Saturnalia, even though with all this crap, all this nonsense with my health, I have had fun. Just the other day, I celebrated my dog's birthday, and my sister in law sent him a care package that I had to hunt down and find. Because I live in a big, gargantuan apartment building, and sometimes packages grow their own feet and go places. And so it was a really joyous moment of giving him these presents, my dog, and he was just loving it like a little kid opening presents. And that brought a lot of joy to me. And so too did other things, other small celebrations. I'm not going to get into every little thing. Small little surprises that made me laugh. I still don't think I've gone 24 hours without laughing out loud at least once. And that's where I come to the point that there's life after hospice. Now, I am aware that it's not going to be this way forever. Eventually, I'll slip into a much worse state when I get closer to the end. But that means it's all the more important to have joy and to celebrate things, even the littlest things, here and now. Because despite all these issues, these physical issues, this terminal descent, I have found joy, laughter, and a lot of moments where I was, quite frankly, having just a good time. That's with a lot of thanks to my family that I'm close to and a few friends. It's good to have people like that. So that's where I get to December 25th. Sol Invictus, birth or rebirth of the undying sun. Now, of course, that's celebrated because solstice is on the 21st of December, which is already come and gone. And so on the 25th, that's when the Romans and other groups, like I said, it came from the east, so probably the Parthians did this too, and some other groups in that area in the Near East. But anyway, Bithynians, Parthians, Scythians, it was a very popular religious event, but it was to celebrate the days were getting longer again. Because all through winter, as you approach winter, the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter until on the 21st, it's the shortest day of the year. That's the winter solstice. And then on the 22nd onward, the days slowly get longer and longer and longer as you begin that long march back to spring and summer. The undying sun is coming back. So that's why they celebrate that. I'm not sure why they did it on the 25th and not the 21st. I think I once knew the background on that, but that's really not important. But that's sort of where I'm at now. When I have those moments with my family, friends, and my dog, to where I'm celebrating something or having a good time, perhaps a good meal. It's sort of like my Sol Invictus, because I'm still alive. Yeah, I've been placed in hospice. Yes, I have a terminal condition. Yes, it's getting worse. But there's still things in my life to live for that I enjoy. And it really feels like, at least so far, my life itself is unconquered. I'm not dead yet. So, in a weird way, it correlates to this time of year and the celebrations that we're done in the Roman Empire, which is the origin of all Christmas and all that nonsense. Again, I've already ranted about this. Look for a podcast a year ago, or I think it's named something like Random Holiday Rant or something like that. I'm doing my best to not repeat it. But you get what you pay for, folks. I'm just trying. I'm trying my best to not do it again. And you paid nil, so you get what you pay for. So if I screw up and go off on that tangent, sorry. Anyway, I just thought that there was a parallel, actually, to that. Yeah, the sun was going away, days were getting shorter, and people in ancient times, that's terrifying. Is it the end of the world? Days are getting shorter and shorter, it's getting colder and colder. But then the sun would come back, and therefore, yeah, the unconquered sun returns. So far, I'm unconquered, or as I often jest, so far, I'm immortal. So far, it's true. I'm immortal. Not dead yet. I guess my fundamental point is that despite the difficulties in life, as grave as they may be, and with my particular crisis and my particular issue, I have to say there is life after hospice. And a lot of it can vary from person to person. But I've been lucky enough to be a very engaged fighter against going away. And despite worsening ailments and frustration and sadness and fear, all that, I'm still unconquered. I still have moments of fun and joy. I'm still alive. And so, on this December 25th, Sol Invictus will have for me a very personal meaning because that reflects more or less my own struggles and the fact that I have not yet gone away. Before I move on to the conclusion of this podcast, I think it's important for me to answer actually some of the questions that I bet are stirring in some listeners' minds. How are you, in this case, you being me, how am I able to maintain joy and celebrate despite all those physical issues and emotional issues that come from them, as I described earlier in the podcast? I already said one, and it's actually a big one. Celebrating my dog's birthday. His birthday is literally on the 21st. So His birthday is on the winter solstice. It's easy to remember. It's his actual birthday. And me being silly and all that, I had help from my sister in law, and he got presents. I made him a steak that I shared with him. I'm not kidding. Cooked a sirloin for us to both eat for his birthday dinner, and he himself has given me a lot of joy. So that's been a big source of my happiness, to be honest. Uh, Example, just last night when we were going to sleep, he was cuddling me, facing me like he so often does, and he placed his forehead against my forehead and wanted to sleep like that. At one point, he heard like a noise and sat up, listened, and then decided it was nothing and went right back down, sleeping with his forehead against my forehead. It's a sign, apparently, of a very deep affection and trust from the dog. It was a very sweet and tender moment and happy moment. So that's one thing that I use to get around all this. I have an emotional support animal. And he is fully registered and licensed as emotional support animal. And he's very good at it. So that's partly how I cheat and get over these physical ailments. But there are other things. I play video games and take pleasure in that when I can. I just the other night had finally a really good meal that I was kind of longing for, and it was delicious. And yeah, the food itself gave me joy. I get a lot of joy from food. So there's that. And I like to learn. That's one of my probably my most favorite thing is I enjoy learning new things. So I engage with that. And that brings me joy. So the answer to how do I overcome all this physical trauma and emotional trauma that comes from it is really not a one size fits all answer. I do things that I know will give me joy. And that's the best answer I could provide to that of how do I overcome these physical and emotional issues? I do things that my personality in particular enjoys. So there is no answer to fit every person. It's something you have to just ask yourself and might have to change how you do those things. But I think the answer to that of how do you overcome strife and difficulty and anguish even in life, it's going to vary from person to person. So thus I think your answer and my answer and Bob's answer and Sarah's answer, they're all going to be different. I mean, there might be some crossover, but It just depends on the individual. I've said it many times, though, before. Uh, I'm a big advocate for journaling. This podcast is my journal. That's how I journal what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. And I've decided to do that a long time ago. So my loved ones, my family, and friends would be able to forever hear my voice. And I'll always basically be with them. Once you're on the internet, it's forever, baby. So I just picked a different venue. For some people, it could be writing things down, it could be painting, it could be music, it could be meditation, it could be hiking. But taking a moment for that internal reflection on yourself and your life and being closer to your inner self is something I strongly encourage for everybody. And pretty much every psychologist and therapist in the universe has also said all the same things. And I've ignored that advice for many years of my life until recent years, I should say. And I came to learn they were right. So that's the only thing that I think cross multiple personalities is journaling and having that time for deep internal reflection to understand yourself. Because that's the only way you're going to figure out what you need to find joy, sometimes in the darkest of all moments. Well, with all that being said, as I already said in the beginning, yo Saturnalia to all my listeners. I hope you have a fantastic Saturnalia. Have fun with your gambling and dice games and switching roles with your slaves and decorating trees with red and green and planting, not planting, placing wreaths of greenery around the Temple of Saturn. Hope you have fun with all those events. Obviously, kidding. I know no one's doing that. But whatever you do to celebrate, I do hope you have fun doing that. And I do swear upon it that there is life after hospice. For some people, it might be a couple of days, maybe even hours. It's not much. I'm an unusual case. I'm a very unusual case where it just stretches out as a slow decline. Again, because it hit me when I was relatively young and had no other significant medical problems. So it's a very slow, arduous decline. So that's given me the opportunity to, I guess, learn how to deal with that. But however long it may be, there is life after hospice. Life is going to end for all of us. I used to say to people, life is a terminal sexually transmitted disease. We're all going to die from it. And it's true. If you look at it, life is a terminal sexually transmitted disease. Bummer. But what you do with it is up to you. And I'm still alive. Hopefully, I'll still be alive on the 25th and I can say Sol Invictus and reflect on, hey, I'm still unconquered, still alive. And frankly, take some pride in that. So that's what I'm hoping for next. But with all that, I'm going to close out this week's podcast. I'm feeling a little weak and tired, and I don't think I can go on much more for right now, but my body is telling me to STFU. So that's what I'm going to go do. But if you wish to support the podcast, you can go to its Spotify homepage and click on support this podcast, or even easier, just go to patreon.com/my dog will eat my face, and you can drop a shekel and support the podcast that way if you so choose. But as I've always said, you've already given to me the best possible gift, and that is allowing me to share these thoughts and these reflections and giving me a voice as I go through all this. And if you've actually listened this far to my rambling in this podcast, then you are a scholar and a gentleman, as it might be said. Oh, wait, you might be a female. You are a scholar and a gentle lady. There you are. You've already given me the best gift. As I said, that's giving me a voice to say these things and these reflections. So thank you. And I mean it sincerely. For now, I got to sign off and go deal with some various physical issues. But hopefully, I'll be in touch soon again. For now, auf Wiedersehen.